Just yesterday, Astro released the Astro Server Actions. Now, this is an experimental feature, so it will be building as we go, but I wanted to take a glance at a first look of this using a real project. What we're going to be doing is receiving form inputs and validating that data server-side using Zod with the schema we set up with Server Actions. It takes a lot of the hard work of validation out of your hands and makes it super simple to work with. Now, again, this is experimental. I just want to take a first look at it and kind of see where it's at on day one. Let's check it out. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. You can find the code that we're going to talk about today in the description if you want to check it out, but you can see here I've got a very basic site with an order form, and then it shows all the current orders up top. We're using AstroDB, which if you're interested in that, I've done a video on AstroDB in the past, and what I want to talk about are these new server actions, right? So let's go ahead and talk through the code just a touch to see what's going on. You can see I've got all the orders that I'm getting from AstroDB right here. They're just listed out down here, but the real important section is this order form. I, of course, have all the items that I want selected here in the form, so all the selects and all the text inputs, all that kind of stuff. The important thing is down here below where the script is actually run. You'll notice that on submit, I'm simply grabbing all the form data, and just a note here that you would want to sanitize the inputs on the front end and eventually the back end as well. But then I'm just hitting an endpoint that I've set up, this API endpoint that posts all that data right here. And the way this form data works, you can grab the entries as an object with object.fromEntries. So we're going to pass that along to this endpoint called add_shirt.json. So let's open this up, and you'll see here that what I've got is a post endpoint. This post endpoint simply checks that there is a body. If there's not, it returns it. Then it checks that it has all these different properties on that object. And then it just passes that along to AstroDB. It says, hey, this should be the right type. These are strings, etc., etc. And then AstroDB should either accept that or reject it. So it is actually working. Once again, you'd want to sanitize the inputs for something more important like an actual site, production site here. But you'll notice that I don't really have any way of validating this data or doing special checks on the data. I could write a bunch of manual tests here on the back end, and because this is server-side rendered here, I'm using the Vercel adapter. That would work just fine. However, wouldn't it be nice if when you hit an endpoint, you actually had a validating option that would allow you to do things like check the length of a string or if it matched a certain enum value? And that's really what we want to do. Now, once again, you could write all that logic yourself, hard-coded in here, but let's write it once and then use it everywhere else. That's where these experimental server actions come in. So let's go ahead and come over this way. And if I look at this experimental server actions right here, you'll see that all I have to do is add this right here to my Astro config. So let's go ahead and start by doing that. We'll say Astro config. And just to note that if you're watching this later, you probably want to check the docs because I'm sure this will change, but this is just a first look. All right, so as I've looked at this, you'll notice then what we're going to do is create an actions folder, and we can use an index.ts file inside of here, or JS if you want to do that as well. And all we need to do is define certain actions like a like or a comment in this export const server. So as long as we do that, we should be set to go. So let me come over here. We're going to just create this. So this is inside of actions and then index.ts. Now if I close this down here, all I have to do is say import define action. And this should be from Astro Actions. Then we'll also pull in Z, which is a shorthand for Zod. Now down here, I will say export const server. And this is just going to be an object. And we need to name this whatever we want it to be. In this case, we're sending in an order. So let's go ahead and name it an order. Now we're going to use that define action function here. We're going to simply pass in an object. Now, one of the things you can do if you're sending along a form is tell it to accept a form. So we'll just say form like this, and that way it knows what to expect. So this knows it's getting form data at this point. Now, one of the other things you'll want to set is the input. So what are you going to allow? And this is really where it gets powerful. We're going to define a Zod object. We're simply going to pass along several items, all the items that we want. And in fact, if I come over here to my index page, you'll see at the very top, you'll see that I've got a type for my order. So let me go ahead and copy all that out, and let's just paste it in here. Now it's going to yell at us for a little bit of time, but that's okay. We can handle that. Here, I don't need to actually pass along the ID because that will be generated by AstroDB, but the rest of these things I do want to pass along. So at its very basic, I can just say z.string like this and say that that's going to be a string. Let's replace these with commas. Same thing here, z.string. And here we've got z.boolean. And then with this shirt size, we're going to say it has to be one of these values. So one of the things I can do is say z.enum and simply pass in an array of all these items. Now, instead of having these little or brackets, obviously, I want to change these to all be commas, and then we'll do the same thing here. z.enum, and this will simply be an array of all those as well. Lastly, let's get rid of these right here so that these are commas instead. And then that should be set, but I'm still getting all these red squigglies because there's one more thing you have to do inside of this defined action. And that is to say what you want to do with the action. For that, you need what's called a handler. So these are the three things you need, and you don't have to have the accepted form here, but you do need to have the input and the handler. So here we're just going to have a little function where we're going to take in the order. That's what we'll call it. For right now, we're just going to say return thank you, all right, or something like that. Okay, so when we hit this server action here, it's going to check that our input that we send along, that should be a type of form. When we hit that, it's going to check that it contains all of these items. Now we can get more specific here, and we probably will here in just a second, but let's go ahead and open back up our index.astro page and scroll all the way back down to where we were doing this client-side logic. Of course, this could be in React or anything else. If you want it to be, that's just fine. You can do whatever you want. In this case, I'm just using vanilla JavaScript to keep it as simple as possible, and you can apply this to whatever your scenario might be. So let's go ahead and come up here, and instead of doing all that, all we're going to do is await actions, and you'll see I get this from Astro::actions, and that should have imported. Let's just double check. Yep, there we go, right there. And I simply want to add this here, right? So I'm going to just grab the order, and I'm just going to pass along the form data. That's it. So as soon as I do this, it should validate it for that endpoint, and then basically say, hey, we're good to go. And it should return to us that string of whatever it said. So let's go ahead and capture this somewhere. Let's call this something like res equals, and then let's just console.log the res that we get back. Okay, so if that worked, we should be able to come over here, and I can say like Chris Pennington, whatever. That should work, and I hit submit. Now you'll notice here I've got Console Ninja telling me that already, but I can also pull this up down here, and it says thank you. Okay, so it's actually working properly. So it's validating that all that's the case. Now let's try to break one of these things. And to do that, I actually want to get a little bit more specific. So if I come over here, you may know that with Zod, you can do things like, I want to set a max here. And I could say something like, it can't be more than 10 characters. And I can even pass back a custom message if I want to. So this message could say something like, your first name must be no more than 10 characters. Okay, perfect. So now let's come back over here, and if I hit all this stuff, that'll be way too big, and I try to submit it here. If I come down this way, you'll notice that I get an error. So it says failed to validate. Now I can actually get more specific error messages from Zod here. I can actually get this one right here, where it'll attach it to this thing that was passed along and say, hey, your first name must be no more than 10 characters. But you'll see that as the most basic, instead of returning here from your handler, it just returns an error. So you can see how you can get way more specific here. You can actually do a check on an email. So if this was an email, for instance, I could come in here and say, instead of z.string, at the end of this and all this max stuff, I could say also email, right? And it will actually validate that this is a type of email. So really, really helpful to not have to write all this logic myself. I hate doing that kind of stuff. Zod gives it for you out of the box, so why not use it here? Now there's some smarter stuff you can do with the type so that you can extract all of this, but I'm not going into that for now, just trying to stick to the basics of what it seems like the Astro actions are trying to do. All right, so maybe let's change this. Let's change this to like 20 for both of these, and let's do the same thing down here. And in this case, maybe we'll make this 30 characters. Now you could also have a minimum as well. That might be something else you want to do. So let's add that to both of these, like min. You could say it has to be at least 1, which should be the case either way, because that's what the form is requiring as well. But just to make sure, let's come over here and say message and say something like must be more than 0 characters. Okay, perfect. So now we've got two different kind of scoped items for this string. It's not just a string, it's a certain type of string. And down here, we actually have certain values, and only these values would be allowed. So now what do we want to do? Well, we don't need our API endpoint anymore, so I can go ahead and come over here to my add_shirt.json. We don't need that at all anymore. Instead, what I'm going to do is simply steal this, and we're going to use this exact same idea when it comes to our form. Except instead of having to do all this kind of finagling myself, I should be able to come over here. Let's just open this back up, and I'm just going to add it directly here. So we'll say db.insert. Let's pull this in from AstroDB, and then the order as well from AstroDB. Instead of passing all this in, writing it all out like this, I don't have to like figure all that out. I can just grab the actual form data that I've got. So I called this order right here, so that's what we're going to call it here. Or if that's unclear, I could say something like new order and add this here. And now what it's going to do is pass along my new order right here, and then send back this returned message of thank you. So that means when I refresh afterwards, it actually should show it up top here. So let's say Chris Pennington and small works. Oh, look at this. I forgot to show you this. Look at that. Isn't that cool? All right. It's just an SVG with current color switching depending on what you have here. All right. And then let's subscribe to the newsletter. Why not? And submit it. So now if I refresh here, you'll see, oh, I forgot to refresh it last time, but now you see both of these things came through. Now let's talk a little bit more about the error messages. When you actually look at the RFC, that's how early this is. And let's see, I forget what the error messages are. Right down here, you'll notice that you can actually wrap the entire call in a safe right here. And this safe basically tells you whether or not it's true, whether or not it actually passes the test. You can extract from that the data, which would be whatever you return from the handler, or an error, which is the specifics of the error message. So let's go ahead and do that now. So let's come back over here. We're going to get rid of that. Come inside here, and instead of just console log resing this, what we're going to do is extract out of here the data and the error. And then we need to wrap all this form data in safe like this. So .safe. And then this should return to us either the data or the error. So let's get some of this stuff we had before. And maybe we can actually just rewrite it. I think that might be easier. So we're going to get either data or error. So we're going to say if data, then what I want to do is do a couple of things. We're going to simply alert. And obviously, you'd probably want to have some kind of toast message instead, but this will work for now. Just whatever we get back. In this case, it would just be the data, right? And we probably also want to clear the form. And I think I just called it form. Is that right? Yeah, form.reset. And that should clear the form as well. Okay, so if we get data back, it should clear the form and then alert whatever the message was, the success message. Now, I could also come in here and say if there was error, then for now, let's just console.log the error. Okay, so let's come back over here and let's first of all just add something properly. So Chris and something, we'll go medium and let's go red. And then let's go ahead and submit this. It says, thank you. All right, so that's good. If I refresh, it should show me that here, red, medium. I did not subscribe. Okay, perfect. So we got all that set and ready to go. Now, let's go ahead and do an error, which would be making this way too long. So let's do that, and we'll see what happens. So if I hit submit, you'll see I get an input back here that just says failed to validate. I promise, though, that you actually get more specific details here. So what are those? Well, if you come back to the RFC, you'll see down this way that what you can get is if it is an input error, you can actually grab the fields off of it. And this right here is another thing that you get from Astro Actions. So let's go ahead and check this here. So if it is an error, if I get error back, and if is input error, so if it's an input error of one of the form items I sent back, then I want to check on that. And if that's the case, then what I want to do is not just console log the error, but the error.fields. So let's go ahead and do this one more time, and hopefully this will make sense when what I'm doing. So let's make this super long. And just like this, and just submit it, you'll notice that what I get is an object back with all of the errors contained. Now in this case, it's only the first name, but if I were to add a really long second name, you'll see that now I get both of those. They're labeled by whatever the input was because it's an input error, and then I actually get back this specific message from Zod. So how could you use this? Well, what you could do is listen to this and say if there are errors, then what I want to do is match these against whatever the inputs were, and then I could show custom error message for each of those. Now, I won't do that in this case because I just want to really make this a first look view, but you can see how easy that would be to do. Now, in short, what this means is instead of doing a huge call to an API endpoint and validating all the data manually, all I have to do is write a single schema, which I've done right over here. This single schema then takes care of everything for me. I can return right here if everything is successful, and you might want to wrap this in like a try-catch as well. That would be another option. Or I get back that error where I can actually pick off custom inputs as well. Well, I hope this was interesting to you. If you're interested more in Astro, I have a course called Learn Astro at learnastro.dev. Feel free to check it out. I'm sure as this thing gets out of experimental, I'll add this to sections of the course, and I'm really excited to see how Astro continues to develop. Well, thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Happy coding.